හරිම සුමුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Wednesday, the 13th of March 2024. PowerPoints. Renewable energy developers commit to connect all approved projects to the national grid by 2030. Visiting IMF delegation reviews state-run CEB and CPC pricing formula. Re-emergence. Vehicle imports could restart gradually with economic resurgence in full flow, hints President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
But hopefully next year, step by step, we will do that. First getting to the essential types of vehicles.
Port City potential. Port City a valuable asset to overcome the crisis if harnessed correctly, stresses Port City Economic Commission member Salia Wickremesinghe.
We would be lucky to have this asset as part of Sri Lanka's toolkit for economic recovery.
Intelligent schools. AI to be introduced into the ICT curriculum in a pilot project from grade 8 onwards.
On the 13th, 14th and 15th of March at the Water's Edge at Slim Dialogue Brand Week.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
From Derana, this is Derana First at 9 with Ndivari Amuata and Mahish Johnny. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us on First at 9 this Wednesday. We have a lot of stories to bring to you. Before that, a very good evening, Ndivari. How are you?
Good evening. I'm doing very well, thank you. I hope you're doing well too. Good evening to all of you joining from home and on your mobile phones and online. We have again a number of stories, including I think we have a top story from the world across that we're talking about. Neighboring India is also coming up with some developing story, but here comments made at the political arena take center stage, especially centering elections.
Elections are now slowly we are getting to the deadline where elections needs to be called somewhere around in latter August, early September as per the constitution, because before I think October you need to finish the whole process. So I think somewhere around in August we will hear that. So right now everybody is getting ready. President seems to be in an upward beat. He held a rally in Kuliapitia.
And his closest ally says that the president will be contesting from a new alliance, that he'll be bipartisan. But this also comes on the back of the fact that the SLPP raised concern about the president dealing with parliamentarians directly and individually.
But whatever said and done, there are going to be a lot of horses in this race, and it'll be interesting for us to see how the people will react. Talking about Sri Lankan elections, we also have the US elections, and definitely we know that's going to be between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It's going to be a rematch of 2020. And
this is also after Haley dropped out of...
she did, and yesterday's primaries was basically got Joe Biden from the threshold that he needs in order to be the presumptive nominee. He is the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party.
And that's coming up on World News.
Exactly. That story is coming up. So, like Indivari said, lots of stories to report. So let's begin tonight's bulletin. Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe stated that the prevailing economic crisis would not come to an end even if the funds lost to various frauds during the previous government were recovered.
Commenting further, the head of state did offer a ray of hope by mentioning that the consolidation of the economy, vehicle imports, will be gradually allowed by early 2025.
Now, he made this observation on the basis that the country is currently steadily progressing towards a robust economy.
A cordial gathering organised by the United Youth Union under the theme Future of the Youth was held yesterday at Tapromena Entertainment under the patronage of President Ranil Wickremesinghe. The event saw the attendance of numerous young individuals representing diverse sectors who directly posed questions to the President, who in return offered constructive responses to their inquiries and engaged in friendly interactions with the attendees.
Can you reduce prices of mobile phones and implement measures to communicate free of charge?
The country collapsed as a result of providing everything for free. Nothing is without cost. Even a costless transaction involves a payment made by someone else. We obtained loans when we couldn't ascertain substantial revenue. As a result, we failed to settle those loans and I had to assume duties as a president. I would be deceiving everyone if I pledged to provide this facility free of charge. We are currently progressing towards a robust economy with increased cash in hand.
Would you consider relaxing private vehicle imports anytime this year? Because the current used car market has doubled and tripled in price and there's no real price control.
I can't see it happening this year, but hopefully next year, step by step, we will do that. First getting to the essential types of vehicles. This year we have allowed buses to be brought in for tourists.
There seems to be no method for recovering funds lost due to fraud during the previous regime. Is there a way to recover these funds?
Firstly, I don't think that these funds can be recovered despite who we borrow from, as we have already obtained a number of loans. It would be a complete lie if someone says that the current issues can be solved by the recovery of these funds. I have appointed a commission and anyone can report any issue to that commission. We will not intervene in the operations of that commission. However, the ones who are reporting these issues should also back that up, as I cannot go around filing lawsuits and get involved in such cases.
New Dulux Pentolite Hygiene Plus. Refreshing walls for generations.
Minister of Education Dr. Susil Premajayantha emphasises that measures are currently underway to revise the information and communication technology curricula in local schools for students from grade 8.
He added that the subject of artificial intelligence will also be introduced into the prevailing ICT curriculum for the students of the aforementioned grades in schools.
Speaking at an event yesterday, the Minister of Education revealed that the pilot project for launching the new curriculum will commence on the 19th of March with participation from 17 schools.
At an event held yesterday in commemoration with the 100th anniversary of the Girls' High School in Mount Lavinia, Minister of Education Dr. Susil Premajayantha graced the occasion and shared a few thoughts.
Throughout the past 78 years, an exam-centered education system governed this country. However, presently most countries have withdrawn from this exam-centered education system and instead an era where children are evaluated through extracurriculum activities. Technology will also be an integral part of this education system. A journey that requires rapid progress lay ahead of us. Along with changes made to the education sector, there are advancements in the technological sector as well. Among them are biotechnology, nanotechnology, and artificial intelligence. We are faced with the challenge of introducing these technological advancements to the sector within a short time span. It is counterproductive to speak about the failures of the past. Measures have been taken to revise the current information and communication technology curriculum in local schools for students from grade 8 onward, and content has been accordingly developed. The pilot project for launching the new curriculum will commence on the 19th of March with the participation of 17 schools, where information and communication technology is being combined with AI technology. We have implemented the required framework to elevate the standard of the education system to international levels. A week later, the pilot project will commence with the participation of 20 schools.
Member of the Colombo Port City Economic Commission Salya Wickremesinghe states that the Colombo Port City is a part of Sri Lanka's toolkit to overcome the crisis by leveraging it as a useful asset. Addressing a public lecture themed Reshaping Sri Lanka's Economic Horizon with the Port City, he was also of the view that investor reference or preference to Sri Lanka's lifestyle and locations is the competitive advantage in attracting businesses to the Colombo Port City.
In terms of where we are in our economic recovery, we would be lucky to have this asset as part of Sri Lanka's toolkit for economic recovery. Even if we were not in need of economic recovery, this would be a very useful asset to leverage. Well, now that we are where we are and striving to get out of the constraints that our tight economy has brought upon us, it is very, very important, if used in the right way. The port city will soon change its name to the International Financial and Tech City.
Can project of this size take off without tax concessions?
Not everybody working inside the port city, not every authorized person has any exemptions from income tax. It's only those that have been classified as businesses of strategic importance, and that is sector specific. That has certain targets, certain minimum investment quantities, certain minimum turnover, certain minimum employment specifications, certain trust sectors which have been selected at the highest level of the executive and the cabinet. Those can be classified as businesses of strategic importance, and as such, they would be entitled to a tax incentive. Now, the important part about that is, from an incentive point of view, it is supposed to be something that is given in the absence of which nothing would happen. So it is actually supposed to incentivize an investment that would not take place without it. So what the Commission is doing is analyzing the business models of these proposed BSIs to understand whether an incentive is actually necessary or not. Some projects require to be incentivized because they may be high capital intensive projects. Now, for example, you wanted somebody to come and spend a $500 million amount of money on a big vertical development. In such cases, tax incentives are a risk mitigation for them. I'm afraid we compete with tax incentives globally. While we are in an IMF program, we are highly discouraged from offering tax incentives. We are not throwing them around like confetti. APs do not get tax incentives. BSIs will get some tax incentives depending on the nature of the business. Actually, what we need right now is investment. We need employment. We need knowledge transfer. We need global visibility. If we take a position that is too conservative on that, we may find that we are depriving ourselves of future economic potential. So it's a balance.
There are a lot of similar cities coming up around the world. What would Sri Lanka's port city or international financial and technology cities' competitive advantage be over many other cities, similar cities coming up?
From the discussions I've had with many over the last 2.5 years, they very much like the Sri Lanka brand. They very much like the Sri Lanka lifestyle. So that's a huge part of our attraction is the location, the lifestyle, the proximity to international trade. Those are very investor-specific USPs.
Bangladesh High Commissioner Tariq Mohammad Ariful Islam says that Sri Lanka and Bangladesh must look at value-added products to expand bilateral trade between the countries as both countries trade in similar types of goods. Delivering the keynote speech at the discussion held to discuss investment opportunities and the benefits of the proposed preferential trade arrangement to both countries, the High Commissioner said that Bangladesh is slated to graduate out of the group of least developed countries in 2026. He further highlighted that the importance of finalizing existing trade agreements with Bangladesh in its current state to maintain the existing market trades with the region. The benefit of this would be for Sri Lanka to leverage the explosive growth Bangladesh is slated to enjoy with that status change, which would in turn benefit Sri Lanka's bottom line.
The discussion on Bangladesh-Sri Lanka, investment opportunities and the benefits of the proposed preferential trade arrangement organised by the Sri Lanka-Bangladesh Business Council of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce was held in Colombo yesterday.
So Bangladesh being a larger economy, it holds huge potential for Sri Lanka. The bilateral trade figures may not be very impressive. The trade is only $300 million US, hugely in favor of Sri Lanka, but that is not an issue at all. But one particular aspect I want to highlight is our similar product range. When it comes to trading between Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, we trade mostly similar items like apparel, tea, fabric, cotton, paper and paper boards and plastic products. And perhaps that is one reason why the trade volume is so poor. But that doesn't mean that trade cannot expand. What we need to do, I feel we have to go for value addition. I think we haven't done very well in value addition, neither Bangladesh nor Sri Lanka. And we need to do a matchmaking between our respective comparative advantages. And that is why we need the PTA to boost the trade. What what is the potential benefit of having a Bangladesh-Sri Lanka FTA according to our understanding. One is to expanding the area which are already covered by the WTO and SAFTA and expand what is not covered by the WTO and SAFTA. So basically we want the PTA to be something of SAFTA plus. First challenge is the lower number of goods we trade, just 150 odd. We need to expand the basket. Similar geographic orientation of the exports. Our main exports are going to the US and EU market, and same with Sri Lanka. So we are trying to move away from being too dependent on ready-made garments, and that has already started. In our case, the willingness comes from a reality that we are going out of the least developed country status from 2026, after which many of the concessions that we used to enjoy from the developed world will go away. And that is why we are looking seriously at doing PTAs and FTAs to retain those concessions and to retain our competitiveness. And when it comes to Sri Lanka, we all know that your authorities are very keen to do FTAs and PTAs, but for a different reason, mostly for your economic recovery. But I see that here, I think we are on the same page. So Bangladesh, Sri Lanka PTA could be a good test case.
The IMF Senior Mission Chief for Sri Lanka, Peter Brewer, along with other IMF officials currently in Sri Lanka, held a meeting with the Minister of Power and Energy, during which a review of the pricing and balance sheets of state-run Ceylon Electricity Board and Ceylon Petroleum Corporation were discussed.
The Minister of Power and Energy, Kanchana Vijayasekara, said that the IMF team, headed by Senior Mission Chief Peter Brewer, had discussed a recent electricity tariff cut and reviewed the progress on the commitment of the CEB, the CBC and the balance sheet.
Concurrently, the minister has also met with developers of shortlisted renewable energy projects of the country to discuss matters pertaining to the approval process and the execution of their projects.
The IMF delegation, who is currently in Sri Lanka, met with the Minister of Power and Energy, Kanchana Vijayasekara, and State Minister of Finance, Shehan Semasinga, along with other power sector officials today. During the meeting, matters pertaining to the recent electricity tariff reduction, the CEB and CPC balance sheets of 2023, and the current financial position of the CEB were discussed. Minister Vijayasekara, in an ex-post, said that the accounting principles and standards adopted, BSTA filling automation, dispatch audits to be conducted, outstanding payments, forecasts for 2024, the CPC pricing formula, and CPC operations were also briefed and discussed during the meeting. Concurrently, in another meeting held today, the Minister of Power met with developers of 49 shortlisted renewable energy projects. Sri Lanka, in order to achieve the targets of 70% renewable energy by 2030, called for expressions of interest from suitable investors and developers for renewable energy projects of more than 50 megawatts in 2021. According to Minister Vijayasekara, of the 535 project proposals received for the expression of interest, 430 projects were recommended to be shortlisted in 2022. After evaluating the initial requirements, 49 projects were identified to be evaluated for approval. The meeting with the shortlisted project developers was to brief and discuss the approval process, implementation timelines, clearances needed from other agencies, technical requirements and challenges in implementing the projects. The minister further said that the government plans to integrate all the projects that receive approvals by 2030 to the national grid.
Human Rights Watch says that the IMF should urge Sri Lanka's government to abandon draft legislation that would severely curtail civil society and jeopardize the IMF's program in the country. In a letter to the International Monetary Fund, Human Rights Watch stated that the proposed Non-Governmental Organization Registration and Supervision Act in Sri Lanka is among several recent and planned measures that would curtail fundamental freedoms, despite the critical role of public scrutiny in promoting good governance and combating corruption. They stated that a study found that the civil society's participation in the oversight and monitoring of government actions has been restricted by limited transparency, the lack of platforms for inclusive and participatory governance, and the broad application of counterterrorism rules. They added that as a result, opportunities for public participation and the oversight of official behavior included by civil society have become increasingly restricted. Further, the organization is of the view that the IMF should protect the credibility and the efficacy of its program in Sri Lanka by publicly calling on the government to abandon the proposed NGO law, impose a moratorium on the use of the Online Safety Act, and amend the Anti-Terrorism Bill to ensure that its respects human rights standards.
In other local stories we have for you tonight, the National Hazards Early Warning Center of the Department of Meteorology has issued yet another amber heat index advisory for tomorrow for several areas across the island. Now, the advisory states that the temperature felt on the human body in the western, Sabaragamuwa, northwestern and southern provinces are expected to reach a caution level of between 39 to 45 degrees Celsius tomorrow. Prolonged exposure to the levels of heat will cause fatigue, while continuous activity might trigger heat cramps. As such, the Met Department advises the public to stay hydrated, limit strenuous outdoor activities, take frequent breaks in the shade, and to wear light wear and white or light-colored clothing. It also urges the public not to leave children unattended inside vehicles and to check in on the elderly and the infirm.
Welcome back to the news. Opposition parliamentarian Dr. Harsha De Silva says that if the country arrives at a bilateral agreement with the Paris Club debtors under the current government, the new government that inherits post-election power should bear the responsibility of carrying out and implementing the agreement.
Meanwhile, Tourism Minister Harim Fernandez says that the National People's Power Party has gained publicity due to the weaknesses of the main opposition, the Samagi Janabalawegaya. With that, let's see what has happened in the political arena today.
Paris Club එකේ කට්ටිය සමග ද්විපාර්ශ්වීය ණය සම්බන්ධයෙන් එකඟතාවයකට එන්න ඕන.
We must arrive at a bilateral agreement with the Paris Club. President Ranil Wickremesinghe's tenure is only for few months. A government that comes after this has the responsibility, not as a political party, but as a government to protect that agreement.
එකඟතාවය රකින්න. ඇත්තටම
Dr. Harsha De Silva will become the Minister of Finance in the government that we are going to jointly form with Sajid Premadasa. Therefore, knowingly or unknowingly, he does not have to act as a forerunner to the President.
That is commendable. The UNP fell to its lowest point in the recent past. It is great to see them at least having these meetings. I urge them to go to the public more. The public will educate them about the cost of living and difficulties they are enduring.
The reason that Anura Kumara Dissanayake commands these numbers at gatherings is because of the weaknesses within the opposition. The only alternative the main opposition has is to join the government. If they stubbornly fail to do so, I think several leading members within the opposition will join the government.
In business news, with Sri Lankan Airlines seeking a suitable investor, the Minister of Aviation, Nimal Siripala De Silva, confirmed earlier this week that the government decided to absorb $510 million of its total debt. The $510 million will be itemized as $210 million in dollar loans and 414 billion rupees in rupee loans taken by Sri Lankan Airlines from state-run Bank of Ceylon and People's Bank. He said that with the government financial relief, progress of the operational and financial units of Sri Lanka should be visible over the next 6 months. Meanwhile, according to the statements issued by the State-Owned Enterprise Restructuring Unit, in a cabinet decision taken on the 4th of March, the following loans will be taken over by the government, which includes $105 million and 12.9 billion rupees of treasury guaranteed loans from the Bank of Ceylon. This also includes $105 million and 18.5 billion rupees of loans from People's Bank. A defaulted $175 million treasury guaranteed bond, which is due for settlement in June of this year, will remain on the books of the airline. The restructuring unit further added that any proceeds from a case filed against Airbus by the airline following a procurement scandal will be transferred to the government.
Taking you to the Colombo Stock Exchange, the all-share price index continued its upward momentum for an 8th consecutive day and registered a new 5-month high of 11,287, gaining 112 points. Banking sector shares, H&B and Sampath, alongside blue chips, contributed positively, aiding the index to remain in the green zone. High net worth investors dominated the market today with increased participation and accounted for 12% of turnover. Multiple off-board transactions were witnessed, notably on Sunshine Holdings, H&B and Haley's. Sunshine recorded a stake change of 0.3%, totaling 1.5 million shares at 58 rupees. Today's market turnover recorded at 2 billion, 39.4% higher than the monthly average of 1.4 billion. A majority contribution came from capital goods and banking sector with a joint contribution of 45%. Foreign investors remain net sellers, recording net outflow of 40 million, signaling low participation of the foreign segment.
Well, here's an analysis of Sri Lanka's economy by Udishan Jonas from Capital Alliance.
The Treasury bill auctions held today saw the 3-month Treasury bill rates increase by 14 basis points to 10.1% and the 12-month Treasury bill rates increase by 10 basis points to 10.24%. Over the last 2 weeks, we've seen Treasury bill rates edge up, and that also reflected in the Treasury bond auction held yesterday, where the 3-year to 8-year bonds increased in terms of yields by roughly about 20 basis points. 270 billion rupees worth of bonds were auctioned, out of which 244 billion rupees of bonds were accepted. Going into the month of March, we expect inflation to edge down close to about 2% for the month of March 2024. Also, from a borrowing rate perspective, despite the increase in Treasury bill rates, we saw the average weighted prime lending rate fall by 7 basis points to 11.35%. From a currency perspective, we saw the currency appreciate to about 306 rupees to the dollar from the week, from about 308 rupees last. And this is owing to the continuous lower import bill as well as tourism arrivals continuing to remain strong. We also saw the central bank report the foreign reserve figures for the month of February stands at $4.5 billion. Excluding the swap position, Sri Lanka will have roughly about $3 billion in terms of its net official reserves as at present. From a global perspective, we saw gold prices increase to about $2,100 per ounce, which is the record level highs that we've seen in terms of gold prices. And this is owing to the expectation that the US Fed will reduce interest rates in the forthcoming year.
The Sri Lankan rupee closed at 313.45 to 313.75 against the greenback. Here's a look at how the local currency traded against other major currencies of the world.
But for the 9th consecutive year, the Colombo Stock Exchange and global partners partnered with the International Finance Corporation to ring the bell for gender equality in conjunction with International Women's Day. Meanwhile, Jet Holdings PLC recently released its financials for the 3rd quarter of the financial year 2023-2024, reflecting a resilient performance amidst adverse market conditions. With that, here's a look at corporate news in brief.
The International Finance Corporation partnered with the Colombo Stock Exchange and global partners for the 9th consecutive year to ring the bell for gender equality in line with International Women's Day, enhancing women participation in the economy for sustainable growth. In Sri Lanka, IFC's research highlighted that the top 30 CSE-listed companies with higher gender diversity perform better financially. Further, IFC is committed to promoting gender equality and has a strong focus on expanding access to finance for female entrepreneurs and increasing the number of women in leadership roles. Meanwhile, JAT Holdings plc recently released its financials for the third quarter of the 2023-2024 financial year, reflecting a resilient performance amidst adverse market conditions. Accordingly, during the third quarter, JAT Holdings plc recorded its highest ever export turnover at 2,822 million rupees, an 87% leap from 1,511 million rupees recorded during the comparable period in the 2022-2023 financial year, while local paint sales also spiked by 14%. In addition, JAT's Alkyd resin plant in Bangladesh is also expected to further boost the Bangladeshi operations' bottom line into the 2024-2025 financial year. In other corporate news, Mahaweli Reach Hotels plc announced dealings made by the directors of its company. Accordingly, J.A. Panabokka, together with his spouse, purchased a total of 50,000 ordinary shares at ₹13.50 per share. It was further added that the board of directors were informed about the relevant dealings on the 13th of March, following the date of acquisition.
And that's all the news on First at 9 for tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time. I'm Indivari Amwa.
Mahesh Johnny, thank you for joining. Have a good night.